Conor McGregor's biggest problem at UFC 329 might not be Max Holloway's power, it might be his pace. That's the part nobody wants to talk about. Everybody's focused on the left hand, the comeback, the headlines, the money, the spectacle. But if Max Holloway shocks Conor McGregor on July 11th, it probably won't happen with one punch. It'll happen one exchange at a time, one round at a time, 1 minute at a time. Because this fight isn't about who has the bigger name. It's about who can still operate at the highest level when everything gets difficult. And that should make every Conor fan nervous. UFC 329 isn't just another comeback fight, it's a test, a real one. Not a tune-up, not a favorable matchup, not a hand-picked opponent. Max Holloway is one of the toughest assignments the UFC could have given Conor after 5 years away. And that's exactly why this fight matters. Everyone's asking whether Conor can still knock people out. That's not the interesting question. The interesting question is whether he can still handle a fighter who refuses to go away. Because that's where Max becomes dangerous. And that's where this fight could get very uncomfortable for McGregor. Let's start with the first reason Holloway can shock the world. Volume. Nobody weaponizes volume quite like Max Holloway. He doesn't just throw punches. He forces decisions. He makes opponents work every second. He drags them into a pace they didn't want. Then he keeps pushing. Then he pushes some more. And eventually mistakes start happening. That's what makes him different. Against many opponents, one good shot changes everything. Against Holloway, one good shot often isn't enough. And that's a problem for Conor. Because historically, Conor has done his best work early. When he's fresh, when the timing is perfect, when opponents are reacting instead of attacking. Remember when Conor knocked out Jose Aldo at UFC 194 in 13 seconds? The precision was unbelievable. One mistake, one counter, fight over. That's the Conor everyone remembers. But Max isn't Jose Aldo. Max doesn't fight that way. He's willing to absorb moments to create opportunities later. And that changes the equation completely. Here's the question. What happens if Holloway is still coming forward in round 4? That's when things get interesting. Now let's talk about something even bigger, the 5-year layoff. Because eventually every conversation comes back to it. 5 years isn't a training camp. 5 years isn't a minor break. 5 years changes fighters. Sometimes permanently, the body changes, the reactions change, the rhythm changes. And nobody truly knows how those years will affect Conor until the cage door closes. That's what makes UFC 329 so fascinating. We're all guessing, even the people pretending they already know the answer. Remember when Conor said he was not here to take part, he's here to take over? That mindset built one of the greatest runs in UFC history. But mentality and timing aren't always the same thing. The confidence might still be there. The question is whether the execution still follows. And if there's one fighter capable of exposing even small declines, it's Max Holloway. Because Holloway doesn't need huge openings. He finds tiny cracks, then turns them into massive problems. And that brings us to reason number 3. Experience. Not experience in years. Experience in chaos. People act like Holloway is the younger guy in this story, the less accomplished guy. The secondary character? That's a mistake. This version of Max Holloway has been through wars, championship fights, 5-round battles, elite competition after elite competition. He's seen everything. He's survived everything. And he's still standing. Back in 2013, Conor defeated Holloway by unanimous decision. A lot of fans keep bringing that up. I understand why. History matters. But let's be honest, that fight happened in a different universe, different careers, different expectations, different skill sets. The Max Holloway entering UFC 329 barely resembles the 19-year-old prospect from that night. He's smarter, more complete, more dangerous, which means the first fight might tell us less than people think. And that's exactly why a shock result becomes possible. Here's another thing nobody is discussing enough. Pressure. Not cage pressure. Expectation pressure. Conor carries more of it than any fighter in the sport. Every return becomes a global story. Every interview becomes news. Every training clip gets analyzed. Every prediction becomes a debate. That pressure creates opportunities. Because while everyone is watching Conor, Max gets to focus on fighting. That's a powerful position. Sometimes the hunter is more dangerous than the hunted, and Holloway enters this fight with very little to lose. That makes him incredibly dangerous. Now let's talk styles. Because styles decide fights. Conor remains one of the greatest counter-strikers we've ever seen. The left hand is real. The timing is real. The accuracy is real. Nobody is questioning that. But counter-strikers need opportunities. They need moments. They need opponents to give them something. Max Holloway doesn't always cooperate. He creates volume, he creates movement, he creates constant decisions. And the longer a fight stays competitive, the more those decisions start adding up. One missed counter, one late reaction, one extra combination, one extra round. Eventually those moments become a trend. Then that trend becomes a problem. And suddenly the fight looks very different than people expected. Remember Conor's second fight with Dustin Poureeyay in 2021? The finish came in round 2. Not because Conor forgot how to fight, but because sustained pressure created opportunities. Pressure matters, activity matters, momentum matters, and Holloway's entire game is built around all three. That's why this matchup is so dangerous. Not because Max is guaranteed to win, because he has a clear path to winning. A very clear path. And honestly, that path is easier to see than many fans want to admit. Now let's bring it back to UFC 329, because this is where everything comes together. The crowd, the headlines, the comeback story, the pressure, the expectations. Every narrative points toward Conor McGregor. That's what happens when you're one of the biggest stars combat sports has ever produced. But narratives don't win fights. Preparation does, execution does, adaptation does, and Holloway has spent his entire career proving he belongs in elite company. That's why I think people are underestimating him. Not because Conor is washed, not because Conor can't win, because Max Holloway is exactly the type of fighter who ruins comeback stories. He's durable, he's disciplined, he's relentless, and he's experienced enough to survive early danger. If he survives early danger, everything changes. That's the key. Not round 1, not the first exchange, not the first big moment. The key is what happens after. What happens when the fight settles? What happens when fatigue appears? What happens when adjustments become necessary? That's where Max Holloway can shock Conor McGregor. And that's why this fight is so compelling. The opening claim wasn't clickbait. It wasn't hype. It wasn't disrespect. It's a legitimate possibility. Because Holloway has the exact skill set that historically creates problems for fighters returning from long layoffs. Relentless pace, elite durability, championship experience, and zero fear of the spotlight. So here's my position. If Max Holloway shocks Conor McGregor at UFC 329, it won't be because he got lucky. It'll be because he forced Conor into the kind of fight nobody can fully prepare for after 5 years away. And if that happens, UFC 329 won't be remembered as the night Conor returned. It'll be remembered as the night Max Holloway stole the entire story. Tell me I'm wrong. Does Max Holloway have the perfect style to derail Conor's comeback?